Something I have been thinking about from time to time is how men do not receive the same attention as women do when it comes to being harassed and assaulted. It is already embarrassing to go through certain traumatic experiences, and it is worse when you are mocked for it. The few times I talked about experiencing sexual assault as a minor, I lost respect from others for it. There is an unspoken stigma that if a man is abused, he should endure it quietly or not complain. Apparently, only women are considered victims. Similarly, female predators are not reprimanded as severely as male ones. I hope some men here can provide more insight into this common occurrence. Story 1. A friend of mine from Generation X was telling me about his first time. His aunt by marriage was his first partner. He was 13 years old. He and his friend experienced similar situations. I asked him if they told anyone, and he kept saying no, blaming it on being hormonal teenagers. I then asked him what he would say if someone did that to his son. He finally understood. I feel like men are raised to think that if it is sexual attention from women, they are not allowed to say no. It is wrong. Story 2. Almost all male rape cases go either unreported or unpunished because of at least one of the following reasons. 1. Victims are ridiculed by both women and men, especially men, and are told things like, "Come on, man, you probably liked it," or "I wish it was me." And sometimes even no, men deserve to get raped. The justice system treats female rapists differently. They often roam freely looking for new victims in the worst cases or are sentenced to house arrest in the best cases. Female teachers who groom children are usually only fired, while male teachers who commit the same acts are sentenced to life imprisonment. The double standards are obvious, and when women are offenders, they are often seen as lonely or mentally ill. These double standards are unfair. Story 3. No one wants to listen to men complain. You are expected to suffer in silence with the rest of the group. Story 4. Fundamental men being victims is seen as a personal failing, while women being victims is seen as a societal failing. You might get more sympathy if you are a victim as a young boy because children being victimized is seen as more of a societal failing. Things become complicated if you are victimized by a man or a woman as a child. Victimized by a woman? If it is sexual, then people are likely to react strangely, especially if the woman is attractive. Victimized by a man? You are probably going to receive a decent amount of sympathy. If you are an adult man and you get victimized, chances are you will receive little to no sympathy. This is not to say it is right or wrong, just that it is generally how people perceive it. It is unclear if this is due to societal norms or more instinctive reactions, but it seems like a gut response regardless. Story 5. As a general rule, men have been raised to keep feelings of vulnerability to themselves. However, society has shifted to address this, and in my lifetime, I have seen a lot more attention given to the issue. Male victims of female-on-male crimes have been taken more seriously as well. Story 6. I can really relate to what you're saying. I was underage when I was groomed by a woman about 30 years older than me. At the time, no one saw it as abuse. Instead, I was congratulated like I had won at life. In reality, it was 5 years of emotional, mental, and physical abuse that really messed me up. People used to clap me on the back and joke about it at my expense, so I learned to just stay quiet and get over it. But it never really goes away. Even now, some older men who knew about it still bring it up and laugh at my expense. That said, when I have opened up about it more recently, either privately or publicly, people seem to take it more seriously and show genuine sympathy. That has been surprising, but also a bit healing. The stigma is still there, but at least the conversation is starting to shift. Story 7. I had a woman attempt to rape me. I told her no several times and tried to leave, but she held on to me or pushed me and said that it was going to happen. I was eventually able to get to my truck and close the door. When I say I have dealt with attempted rape, I get a dismissive laugh, a smirk, and a single nod. Story 8. It is traditional gender roles and norms. Boys are raised to believe they must protect, provide, and initiate. If a boy is physically abused, he will blame himself because he should be able to protect himself. If neglected, he believes he should be able to provide. If sexually abused, he may think he somehow seduced the abuser or that his physical response meant his body wanted it. He may interpret his orgasm as enjoyment, regardless of how disgusting he found the experience. A girl who is abused will often look to others for help. If there is none, she may take comfort in rescue fantasies of a Prince Charming coming to save her. A boy who is abused will turn on himself, believing he was too weak or incompetent to protect or provide for himself, and will hate himself. Story 9. I would imagine it is due to men seeing other men go through trauma. They have the idea that they should become stronger, and women see it as, if you cannot protect yourself, how can you protect me? Story 10. I was taken seriously. I was a student becoming a teacher, and part of it involved spending time in classrooms volunteering to teach subjects in disadvantaged communities. During one visit, I was sitting at a table to the side looking at some materials when the teacher sat next to me, put her hand on my inner thigh, and started to move toward my groin. I backed off, avoided her for the rest of the day, and sent an email to the professor and the placement team at the university. I was immediately moved to a new location, and that teacher was removed by the university so she would no longer receive volunteers from the school. There was zero hesitation from them. The instructor was male and only said, "Thanks for letting me know," without expressing any negativity. Story 11. It never occurred to me that I could be a victim. Since childhood, most of the messages I received from peers and family were that I needed to defend myself and, if I could not, I was less than. There was rarely any thought given to validating what was done to me. Even the care I received from my mother was dismissed and disregarded by almost everyone around me. To be a man, I had to reject my mother's care and disassociate from her. I could not associate with any semblance of being a victim. I have encountered many men who have been assaulted and abused and never even considered what was done to them as wrong or undeserving. Story 12. The wheel of progress turns slowly, but it does turn. Although male victims of abuse do not receive the same healthy response as women, the situation is definitely better now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. If you have been abused and someone is trying to manipulate you out of that process, feel free to categorize them negatively and remove them from your life. There are many people, both men and women, who will take you seriously. Story 13. Because women only care about themselves and other women to the extent that they remind them of themselves, they have no sympathy for men. Men are needed as protectors and providers, but if a man is a victim, he cannot fulfill either role. Women control popular culture and communications, and that is the reality. Story 14. Because women believe that men should be happy to receive any attention at all, and a significant percentage of men cannot engage in sexual activity and feel jealous that someone else has had such contact. Story 15. Never is a stretch, but I understand you. The answer is cultural and also has to do with attraction, like the halo effect. People generally think women are more attractive than men. When race is added to the mix, it becomes even more complex. We care more about women, attractive people, and people who look like us. Of course, who us refers to depends on who you are. Another factor is empathy. We do not develop a mature form of empathy until around 5 years old, and some people never reach that point. They cannot imagine that other people have their own worldview and assume everyone thinks like them. This, along with many other factors, contributes to the complexity. Story 16. Complicated by the fact that a boy might fantasize about an attractive teacher, for example. It does not make it less wrong when the adult takes advantage, but society sees the boy as lucky and the woman as a wish-fulfilling sexual guide. Why the double standard when a girl is the victim? We are wired to protect them. We are wired to protect all children, but for some reason we expect that boys can handle this better. In any case, if the perpetrator is male, everyone wants his head on a platter. As they should. I am certainly not defending pedophiles of any kind. Story 17. Partly because men are expected to protect others, people view him not protecting himself as his fault. Story 18. Because all men are apparently supposed to be the aggressors, being a victim does not make sense to society. This belief has been conditioned by everyone to follow men bad, women good. Story 19. That really hurts. There are people who won't hurt you when you are down. I hope you find those people. Story 20. It is because it is just the way things are, and that may feel like a non-answer, but it is the truth. Modern society has cultural views that are generally accepted. Men are supposed to be the strong ones. Men are constantly thinking about sex and always want it. Expressing emotion is typically a sign of weakness. Physical touch between young boys, such as hugging and holding hands, is stigmatized but common for girls. Adults reinforce these negatives all the time, saying things like, "He is going to have all the ladies go crazy one day," and "big boys do not cry." The children who learn those phrases go on to reinforce them themselves, saying things like, "Do not hug me? Are you gay?" And the cycle perpetuates itself forever. If everybody woke up tomorrow and decided not to keep repeating these negative viewpoints, it would go away in a generation. Unfortunately, we live in a world where Terry Crews can come out and talk about his assault and still be ridiculed by macho men on the internet. It is sad, and it is very unfortunate. Story 21. It is easier to talk to the void or to God about these issues because the rest of the human population does not care about you. Story 22. My ex-wife used to hit me out of anger. When she left the marriage, she was struck with a case of amnesia and said she did not remember ever hitting me. Then she said it must have been funny because she could not hurt me anyway. There was nothing funny about it back then or now. Story 23. Because nobody cares about men's feelings in general. People say they do, but they do not. Being a male is about getting knocked down and getting up. Anyone can be a victim, yet a man acting or stating that he is a victim is not only quietly unattractive to women but also socially frowned upon. It is kind of odd, but it is real. Story 24. Male disposability. Nobody cares about you if you were born male or appear to have been. Every time we bring up men's issues, there is always someone to say, "But what about women?" Story 25. I think your premise is flawed. It is not true that male victims are never taken seriously. Certainly, they are discounted more often these days than female victims, but I believe you overstate the problem. To answer your question on the why, beyond the obvious cultural reasons where men are seen as wanting sex more than women, the reason lies in the nature of the assaults. Men rape women very often by force, using their greater size and strength to make them submit through violence or the threat of violence. Violent crime elicits a strong emotional reaction. By contrast, women rape men most often via incapacitation. Women usually cannot overpower a man, so they rape him by having sex with him while he is asleep, drunk, or drugged. Men do this to women often as well, but it is not the stereotypical rape people think of when a man rapes a woman. This is why I believe people take it less seriously. One involves violence, while the other appears to be normal sex except that the man is unable to give meaningful consent. Story 26. Our culture does not allow men to be victims. This is one of the many ways toxic masculinity harms men. Men are not permitted to lack power over their situation. Story 27. It has to do with the perception of who is us. Women are included in society and community by default, and men are not. Story 28. I have a hypothesis as someone who is very interested and dedicates a lot of time to understanding how society behaves and why. First, we need to understand why society cares about sexual abuse at all. Caring about consent and having a strict definition of consent is extremely recent. It is still debated in many countries, including mine, whether a person can be charged with rape if they are married to the victim. So, we can rule out society cares about consent and mental health as a reason. We need to find what other reasons could possibly exist for society to care. Sexually, how does society traditionally define a dignified woman and a dignified man? A dignified man is heterosexual and virile. A dignified woman is chaste and, preferably, a virgin. That is why society cares about female victims but not male victims. When a man rapes a woman who is not his wife, he is taking away the very thing society considers to be her dignity, her chastity. Men, on the other hand, are often shamed for telling their stories of sexual abuse. If a man admits he was disturbed by a sexual relationship with a woman, or that he is not always willing to have sex with a woman, it takes away what society considers to be his dignity, his constant performance of heterosexuality and virility. Men are taken seriously when their abuser is another man because, in that case, they have also been robbed of their dignity by being forced into a homosexual relationship. This is also why marital rape is not taken seriously. A woman is expected to save herself for marriage. Once she is married, there is nothing left to save herself for, so it does not matter. It has never been about protecting men or women. It has always been about protecting women's chastity and men's heterosexuality. More often than not, society does not care about what matters. Society does not care about individuals. It does not care about your consent, and it does not care about your mental health. Do not expect it ever to care because it will not. Story 29. Men are the only ones who can protect women and children from male predators. The thought of men being victims of predators is deeply unsettling. Story 30. Because the men in power do not care about a male's purity since there is no financial gain to be had from it. Story 31. Look at how the South Park police officers initially reacted to Kyle telling them Ike was in a relationship with his kindergarten teacher. Their first reaction was to call Ike America's luckiest boy. This is exaggerated, but it reveals something about how we view female predators. That does not even include all the anime where a sexually aggressive female and reluctant male are played for laughs. Story 32. Here is the instinctive reason. If you are victimized, men see you as unreliable, and women see you as incapable of protecting them. That is why you lose man points. Story 33. In most cases, men do not feel traumatized to the same extent that women are taught to feel traumatized by the same actions. Story 34. Men tend not to care about other men. I know I do not view other men as like me. It is probably more active for some people. Story 35. Male victims are taken seriously if they are very young or if the perpetrator is male. They are not taken seriously if they are 16, on the football team, and engage in inappropriate relations with a 28-year-old English teacher who then shares her private photos with others. Story 36. I can't comment on cases where I'm not considerably stronger physically, but I can speak about work-related inappropriate advances. Some of them would probably qualify as sexual assault if I were a woman and the other person were a man. It's just annoying. It won't bother me beyond the brief delay it causes before I remove them. Should I be so jaded? Maybe not. In a perfect world, I would acknowledge my feelings and recognize the situation is wrong. But how would that improve anything? My shift would be more annoying with police involvement and paperwork. Even if I received compensation, it would be marginal, and I don't want to cause someone to face legal troubles and employment difficulties when I wasn't materially harmed. For context, I am 2 meters tall, weigh over 100 kilograms, not all muscle, but some, and have 7 years of full-time experience in security, occasionally still filling in. Story 37. Because women are more vulnerable, it is more believable that someone would prey upon them. That is the truth, along with the fact that people might believe you but just do not care as much because you are a man and are expected to absorb it among your other burdens. It is what it is, unfortunately. As men, we have to learn to bear the weight of suffering, responsibility, and competence that women might not handle. Take pride in the fact that you can endure it when others cannot. You may, and I may, at times find this grim and overwhelming, but at the end of the day, we seem so replaceable that there is no alternative. I have had moments which, if the genders were reversed, my telling of the stories could have been met with horror. I had a woman follow me home and nearly break into where I was sleeping after I had already left a dance to avoid her unwanted attention when I was about 17 or 18. Just imagine what kind of crime a man might be charged with if he did that to a woman. It just is what it is. Story 38. Because men are better at standing up for themselves is why, in all things not just sexual harassment, men are expected to take care of themselves because they are men. If they cannot take care of it themselves, people may add more harassment onto their plate, deducting man points. But that is simply because it is expected that they do as it is expected of them. It is not about enduring it silently. It is about standing up for yourself. Story 39. About half of all individuals who sexually assault children are women. They are also the ones who rarely face punishment. Boys are often not believed because there is rarely any sign of the sexual assault. These facts are true. Story 40. I think it is mainly because the vast majority of sexual violence in everyday society is committed by men against women. My girlfriend and her friend were recently drugged and assaulted by a bartender while on vacation together, which is extremely disturbing and painful for me to hear, especially since it happened without me there to intervene. Men are far more likely to assault women than vice versa. However, men can absolutely experience assault and rape from women, but if something like that does happen, it is typically men assaulting other men. I have had a man behave creepily towards me, and I have had a friend who was inappropriately groped by a man while on public transit. Also, culturally, men are viewed as being sexually driven all the time, and while there is some small truth to that, it reinforces the idea that men can never be victims of rape or sexual assault because they are assumed to always want it, unlike women. Men do not always want to be sexual. Often we do, but not as intensely as people think. I believe female-on-male or male-on-male sexual harassment and violence need to be addressed more, but in my opinion, we have bigger issues like mental health and being vulnerable about our negative feelings. Story 41. Because the patriarchy is harmful for men as well. Yes, we benefit from it more than women, but this is one of the significant downsides for us. Being assumed to be in charge, more powerful, and strong means weakness is not tolerated. We have to protect the weak, not identify with them. True equality is the answer here. As long as there is a discrepancy between the genders regarding power, we will not be taken seriously as victims. As we move toward more equality, the problem becomes that we no longer receive the positives of patriarchy while still facing its downsides. It is a process that takes generations, and hopefully, we are one of the last generations that has to deal with this unless all the aspiring alphas get their wish. Story 42. A large part of it is because men process being a victim differently than women do. Some people might blame this on societal pressure, but I do not think that is true. Men are predisposed, probably biologically, to shrug off things that have been done to them. This makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Story 43. I can tell that this post is not serious and is just biased opinion because if you were serious, you would know that the majority of male victims are actually assaulted by other men. The moment you started talking about female predators, I knew you did not post this in good faith. If you really want to have this conversation, you must talk about male predators of other men. You did not post this to talk about male victims. You posted this to criticize women. Story 44. I have seen male survivors receive a lot of support. To answer your question, I think the reason it is not seen in the same light as women's victimization is that the scale and scope of the two problems are radically disproportionate. Men's abuse against women is a problem that largely still enjoys impunity, and the World Health Organization recently declared men's abuse of women an epidemic. Women are much more likely to be murdered, made homeless, and experience sexual coercion in everyday relationships than men. Women still earn less money than men and have less institutional power, so their victimization is far more damaging and makes them more precarious. Because women are often still the primary caretakers for children, their victimization also has more damaging and wide-reaching effects on children. This does not mean men's victimization does not matter or is not traumatizing or sad, but one is a massive global political crisis, and the other is, relatively speaking, more of an exception with far less grave stakes. That is why it tends to get overlooked. This does not make it right, but that is why. Story 45. In the same vein, female predators are not reprimanded at the same level as male predators. Women do not sexually abuse men. Yes, there are rare instances of a woman abusing a young boy, but that is vanishingly rare. To be clear, when it comes to sexual abuse, more men abuse young boys than women do. That is something for consideration. Story 46. I have seen too many of these posts lately. First, when it comes to intergender physical abuse, women are more likely to be victims, and women are more likely to feel threatened by a man. That is why it is and should be a bigger deal. I was once slapped by a woman for no reason. I might have slapped her back, and frankly, if that is your response, I would not completely condemn a man for it. Mostly, it really sucked, but I did not feel threatened and was able to calmly extricate myself from the situation. That is very different from what a woman might feel in the situation. In terms of men being assaulted in other circumstances, such as getting mugged or shot by a woman, no one downplays those. So we can stop trying to act like victims or compare it to man-on-woman abuse as if it is the same thing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.